You're right there. So you can say that. You can share the microphone.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Environment and Economy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday, 6th of May. I'm Councillor David Evans, and everybody, okay, we shall start the meeting. Can I just ask everybody today, we've got a long agenda, and if we could stick to the agenda item in front of us and not wander off into any other areas, that would be very helpful to keep us on track. Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 1, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We've had 3 substitutions: Councillor Alice Derbytson for Councillor Dan Rose, Councillor Rob Davies for Councillor Ros Mansell, and Councillor Andrew Parkhurst for Councillor David Coggins-Cogan. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, agenda item 2, any declarations of interest, including whipping declarations? Okay, Councillor Mike Beers.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Got an interest in agenda item 7, the placemaking plan for Buckley. It's a personal interest. As you know, I represent the Pent Robin ward in the town, and it would be reasonable for members of the public to expect me to participate in this particular item. And I'm also a trustee of the old Buckley Baths, which is mentioned in the report under section 1.08 brackets 4 on page 113. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Pearce. Okay, anybody else? Nobody? Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, minutes. To confirm as a correct record, the minutes of the meeting held on 11th of March and 8th of April 2025. I shall go through them page at a time. Page 5. Page 6. Page 6, Councillor Parker.
Yeah, Chair, would it be appropriate under paragraph 77 to record that you used your casting vote?
No, thank you, Councillor. With the microphones, one has to be on, one has to be off. So when you finish speaking, you have to turn yours. Okay, it's fine if you just leave it. Yeah, you have to put it on and off so the next person can actually speak. If that's what the committee wants, then that's committee could be fine. But I think it says what it says, doesn't it? So. Nothing further on that. Page 6, page 7, page 8, 9. We'll move on to the other minutes. Page 11, 12, 13. I have a mover and seconded that those minutes are correct. Move, seconded. Seconded, thank you. All show of hands, all those in favour? Okay, that's carried in the room and online. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 4, forward work programme. Hand over to Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. So on the 3rd of June, just a reminder that we have the biodiversity briefing. That will be at Wepper Park at 2 o'clock. And I've had quite a lot of positive responses to that. That's good. 10th of June, we've got Communities for Work Plus and Domestic Energy Efficiency Project and Team Update. And on the 8th of July, the annual performance report on year-end, corporate risk register, and we are looking to organise a site visit to Bailey Hill prior to that meeting. We've also got the coastal access barrier update, illuminated sign, street lighting policy and school transport. As you'll see, there are a lot of items to be added, and they will, once we have the dates finalised at the annual general meeting, then they will be placed on the forward work programme going forward for the next municipal year. Are there any items that people would like to add to the forward work programme at this stage?
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I suggest that we invite the car parking partnership, the regional body which manages enforcement within Flintshire's car parks, for scrutiny of their appeals process. Particularly interested, similar to the information rights report that goes to Corporate Resources Overviews and Scrutiny Committee on a regular cycle. The number of appeals lodged, the number of appeals upheld, number of appeals rejected, and the reasons why those appeals were upheld or rejected. And as I say, invite somebody from the body to attend Scrutiny Committee for questions.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any other requests to go on the forward work programme? Online? Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, Chair. Could we consider putting on, being as we're talking a lot about active travel at the minute, would it be possible to put winter maintenance of our cycleways where we want to do our wheeling and things? Because it's something I've raised before, but we did have difficulties with access with the A-frame barriers and whatever, but that's changed now. So is it something we could put on just to discuss, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, any other members? No? Okay, I'll just bring in the officer.
Yeah, sorry, it's just a correction on the forward work programme. It says school transport and it's got Chantal's name on it, which it shouldn't do. It should be Helen Telford. So if they could just correct that, please. Thank you. That was it.
Okay. Okay, we're going to get used to these microphones. Okay, thank you.
Action tracking. Now.
Okay.
So if you move on to the action tracking, you'll see that they are now numbered as requested at the last meeting. There are still some ongoing, but quite a few are now completed. And those that haven't been completed are mainly longer term projects. So it was, I think that they are sort of the one on number 17, the request from Councillor Dave Healy. We have had a response from National Resources Wales, and they are going to discuss the request going forward with Councillor David Healy and the officers involved, and Councillor Healy was happy with that. So that will not be going on to the forward work programme at this stage. Thank you, Chair. I think that's it from me.
Okay, thank you for that. So if we can just move the recommendations on page 15. Committee considers the draft forward work programme and the facilitating consultation with the chair vary the forward work programme, and that the committee notes the progress made. Can I move it? Moved and seconded. Have a seconder, please. Seconded, and can I have a show of hands of those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 5, which is the Healthy Travel Charter, and I shall bring in Chief Officer Katie Willoughby.
Thank you. Good morning, members. So the North Wales Healthy Travel Charter. So this is a report that's circulating around a number of authorities across Wales. So the charter itself was actually approved by the Regional Leadership Board back in July 2022. And it was agreed that the work behind the charter would be led by the 3 public service boards. So for Flintshire, it's the Wrexham and Flintshire Public Service Board. The PSB, as it's known, are asking all public service bodies in North Wales to adopt this charter. Anglesey and Wrexham have already adopted it, and we're now bringing it forward to see whether Flintshire County Council wishes to adopt it. So there are, in Appendix 1, you'll see the charter is detailed there, and there are 15 actions within the charter. And the purpose of the charter is to promote healthy travel for all staff and service users. There are some more strategic aims behind the charter in terms of trying to reduce carbon emissions. There's a lot around, the health aspects in terms of enabling people to use more sustainable modes of transport in terms of active travel, wheeling, cycling, walking, but also trying to reduce social isolation and obviously tackle the climate emergency. So to tackle this, all the organisations across Wales are showing their commitment to healthier and more sustainable forms of transport, and a lot of this leads into the Wales, the transport strategy for Wales, so set by Welsh Government. So it's a series of commitments that Flintshire would make over 2 to 3 years. We are just, so members are aware, we are actually doing a lot of this already. Appendix 4 details, we've had to undertake an assessment of how well we think we're meeting all of the commitments within the Charter. So we've had to do that in Appendix 4. You'll see that some are ongoing, some are, we're well on the way to achieving those commitments already. So really it's about, what more we need to do, where are the gaps, and trying to move towards achieving all of those commitments within that Charter. There isn't that much more I can say about the report. It aligns with what the rest of North Wales is doing. The fire and police are also working towards it. Natural Resources, another public service body that are working towards achieving the Charter. And the only other thing to mention is that there are similar charters in South and Mid Wales as well. So we know we're not alone in trying to achieve this. So yeah, there are 3 recommendations, I think, in the report. Bear with me. So we're asking that you support the adoption of the Healthy Travel Charter in Flintshire, and note the recommendations made by the Public Service Board for Flintshire and Wrexham. And we're also asking that you delegate the signing of the Charter to myself as Chief Officer for Street Scene and Transportation and the Chief Exec. And then following the adoption of the Charter, what we're proposing is that the Mobility and Transport Theme Officer Group would take on the lead in terms of advancing the commitments within the Charter, and then we would continue to report progress through the Environment and Economy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and any other relevant committees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie. Any members' questions on this? Councillor Ibbotson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting of the Corporate Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we had an item on the Public Services Board, where I think I gave my views quite stridently that it is a complete waste of everybody's time and money, producing lengthy reports and endless documents without actually achieving anything directly, when the real work is done by our officers who go out and deliver services on a daily basis, when we're put in the position of having to cut frontline services, and yet, thanks to Welsh Government mandating that we're part of a Public Services Board, we have to fund this useless talking shop. And then we get to this Charter. I'd like to just read to members the very first point on there under Communications and Leadership. Establish a sustainable travel champion network. Establish a network of proactive, sustainable travel champions, including senior staff, managers, and where relevant, elected members who routinely promote and model active and sustainable travel behaviour in line with the sustainable travel hierarchy. Now, if anybody can tell me what that actually means, and if anybody thinks that means anything in plain English to residents of Flintshire, then they deserve a medal. This kind of charters, strategies, waffle is frankly offensive at a time when we've talked about cutting bus services in Flintshire in the last budget. This is an issue that has come to this scrutiny committee this last municipal year. Some services have been curtailed. Our bus network within Flintshire is pretty poor, and I don't think there's anybody in this room who would disagree with it. If there was more money available, everybody would like to see better transport links. Healthy travel means the bus turns up when it's supposed to, you can get on it and it gets to its destination, but that is something that doesn't always happen. Services don't run at convenient times in a lot of the county, including my own ward of Pennyforth, and the services that do exist are quite expensive. To be pouring effort into establishing a sustainable travel champion network and asking staff members to devote staff resource time to talking about healthy travel when frontline services in this county are creaking, I don't think is a good use of public money. I think that if we do have funds to promote and to spend on travel, we ought to be spending that on improving the bus network rather than adopting endless strategies and charters. I appreciate foisted on us most of the time the duties to produce these by the Welsh Government. I appreciate that it isn't the officers of this council who are choosing to do this, that these things are sort of set nationally. This is a systemic issue across the public sector in Wales. It needs addressing, and the way to do that is by focusing on frontline services rather than just talking about buses, actually delivering some buses.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo some of those comments, really. I have reservations about this charter myself, having read the report fully. The Active Travel Fund across Wales cost 218 million across 5 years, but failed to deliver. The percentage of people walking for active travel actually reduced, and the amount of cyclists remained the same. So is this initiative another Welsh Government costly plan which is doomed to fail? I'm not sure from reading this that there is going to be any real improvement. It seems to me that the report is very sort of focused through a certain prism, and that it is not holistic. Councillor Ibbotson has mentioned about the bus services. Well, one of the features of this charter is to link up cycling with bus services, but we all know that you can't take your bike on a bus unless it's folded. The report mentions wheeling. I have no idea what wheeling is. I can just sort of picture old ladies in my village, wheeling down the hills to Mould, and then having a coronary trying to push their shopping on their bike back again. I just don't get it. What we need are decent bus services. The focus seems to be on the big cities, presumably Cardiff and Swansea. There is a considerable reference to air quality, which is important in the cities, not such a feature in rural areas. Narrow, poorly maintained or non-contiguous footpaths are more an issue here, which really inhibit active travel. The report promotes the use of home working, which I can understand from an environmental point of view to reduce the amount of transport, but it's not looking at it holistically. But does it actually benefit councils? Does it benefit the individuals? This is looked at through a very narrow prism. The report also seems to promote discrimination when it refers to promotions for walkers and cyclists. Well, how do people who are not able or not willing to walk or cycle to work, how does that affect them? The report also refers to this hierarchy of desirable transport, having highly polluting diesel fueled buses being more environmentally sustainable than electric cars. I don't get that. So I think the report from Welsh Government is flawed. And whilst I fully want to see people living more active lives, more environmentally conscious, etc., I don't think this report is the answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Parkhurst. Councillor Pearce.
Right, thank you, Chair. I have reservations on this charter. Section 102, a healthier and more sustainable form of transport. It's just an aspirational desire. Yes, everybody would want this, but there's nothing in there to say how we're going to do it. The charter talks about commitments organisations will make over 2 to 3 years to support their staff and visitors to walk and cycle more. take public transport. What public transport? We have issues with public transport. And also a switch to electric vehicles. Now, electric vehicles we consider are cars. Yesterday in the national press was a headline about how we're going to have e-scooters to replace cars. There's nothing in this about that. And they've been around a long time. They're allowed on the road as a parental trials. They're currently ongoing, but there's nothing in the report which looks at that. It gives us the statistics in section 103, but it's really meaningless, because how are we going to get people out of their cars? There's nothing in the report which tells us that. And as I say, it's just an aspirational desire. This is what everybody wants, but nobody wants to get out of their cars. It talks about in 107 the wider vision of travel in Wales. And it talks about walking and cycling are the default for short journeys. Well, how long is a short journey? What are we talking about? And of course, it would be weather dependent. Yeah, it's limited. It's weather dependent, and certainly this time of the year, yeah, it's okay. But you move from October through to March, and I think that the uptake won't be that good. So if they talk about walking and cycling are the default for short journeys, it therefore follows that for longer journeys, there must be travel by a car. So until we've worked out how we're going to get people out of their cars and doing these things, this will just stay on the shelf, basically. It talks about a vision of a well-used, fully integrated transport system. Typical of Welsh government, because this is what they have in South Wales. What happened to our metro system? Recently, we had public services in Flintshire being cut. Number 5 from Mould no longer goes to Ellesmere Port, and yet it's promoting cross-border transport. It stops at the border. It doesn't cross the border. That's been curtailed. Yeah, transport officers here have identified that savings are more important than providing a service. So it talks about section 11, fostering a culture where active travel becomes preferred and convenient choice for short daily commute, school journeys and leisure activities. It might be okay around town, but I don't think it would work between towns. What we need to do is look at the public transport. And let's have a look at the healthy charter that's presented. Under the heading of public transport, give staff discounts. Is that it? Why aren't we looking at the bus infrastructure? Discounts for staff on Transport for Wales rail services. So to apply that to Flintshire County Council, you would have to come on the train from Chester or Llandudno, on the Transport for Wales train, perhaps get off at Flint, and then try and make your way here on a bus that may or may not turn up. So I've got serious reservations about this. Under public transport, discounts for staff, I think it's really not worth the paper it's written on. So I think if this, I would support the scheme for Flintshire, and let's see how it goes. But let's monitor the take-up of the scheme and monitor the reduction in the car use. And then let's bring it back to scrutiny to see how we've got on. Finally, we're talking about short journeys saving emissions. But staff travel long distances to and from work by car. And those emissions over those long trips here and back home could counteract any emission savings saved on the short journeys. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chair. It's just going back to the point I made on the forward work plan, really. If we want to be serious about sustainable active travel, we need to, not only in the winter months, like Councillor Pierce says, but when I cycle to work, it's 3.8 from Connors Quay to Deeside Industrial Estate. It's 3.8 or 3.9 miles on my bike, 6 miles in the car. And I used to cycle regularly. But what happens is the vegetation makes the paths narrower and narrower and narrower during the summer months. And we rely on sustrans to go round. They do a brilliant job. They volunteer. I know they get charitable trust from where I work. And then obviously in the winter, I could name you 20 people who fell off the bikes and broke elbows and collarbones and everything. So if we are serious about it, we need to start looking at making them usable 12 months a year. So that would include lighting, winter maintenance and summer maintenance as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Richardson. Okay, I'll hand over to the Chief Officer.
Yeah, thank you, and grateful for all the feedback as well. We have got a few officers in the room as well to help answer any questions that members have. But one of the key points of the report as well is to point out that there are new legislative requirements in terms of us having to promote active travel, which came in January 2025. So we will have a duty now to promote active travel. So this is part of that the intention behind Welsh Government is that we're doing more to make sure that people are aware of the need to move to sustainable modes of travel. It's, I take on board some of the comments in terms of the weather-related issues, but unfortunately, without additional funding to undertake some of those maintenance regimes in different times of the year, then it's very, very challenging for the local authorities to be able to do that. So, again, the plea needs to go back to Welsh Government that we need additional funding if we do expect further funding for, things like winter maintenance on cycleways, which we just don't have that level of funding currently. So I think it's really valid to make those points. So, yeah, thank you for the feedback.
Okay, just looking to see Councillor Bass.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as the Chief Officer said, there's some good points to be made here. We've got to admit this is what we'd see as aspirational for North Wales, far easier to deliver in a big city, as has been pointed out. I mean, it's so much easier to do a scheme like this in Cardiff. What I can say is that at every opportunity when it goes to committee on a North Wales level, everybody in North Wales is raising the concerns of what works well in Cardiff or Swansea needs tailoring to a North Wales scheme, because it's far more rural. We do need more buses on the scheme. Yeah, it does need tailoring to suit the North Wales area, as opposed to a scheme that we can see it on the ground that works well in places like Cardiff. It's working great. Trains, buses, they're working together, but not so much here. But I will say it's just to put a bit of a positive on this, because that's been a little bit negative. Promoting new active travel schemes, community events, benefits of active travel to school, active journey program, school streets, school bikes and scooter. I know the list goes on and on of schemes that are in place, some done, some planned, and more to be done. I'm sure Lee could, I'm not putting him on the spot, but Lee would know a bit more about some of these. But thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Katie, finally, yeah.
Yeah, just to answer the question about what wheeling was as well, I think that came up, sorry, Councillor Parkhurst, but it does cover scooters and wheelchairs as well. So it covers e-bikes, e-scooters, and just general ski, yeah, any.
So yeah, just basically any form of wheeled transport, as Katie suggested. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we can move to the recommendations as they are on page 25. There's 3 recommendations there. I won't read them all out, but can we have a mover? Those moved. Let's go have a seconder. Have a seconder, please. Okay,
Richard Lloyd.
seconded, and can I have a show of hands, those in favour? Okay, can I have a show of hands, those against? 2. That's carried. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 6, which is the update on the deposit return scheme and extended producer responsibility. I'll hand over to.
Yeah, thank you very much. And can I just quickly introduce the officers as well? At the end of the table, we've got Chantal Humphreys and Chris Goddard also here as well. So again, this is an update report about the introduction of the proposed deposit return scheme and also the extended producer responsibility legislation for packaging which is led by the UK and Welsh Government. We brought a report to this committee back. Again, we've given some history around this, and I'll come on to of why that's changed over time. But since that time, UK government have also introduced the extended producer responsibility for packaging, which I think members for a long time have been asking for, that we put the onus back on the producers of the packaging. So it's out. Sorry. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me better now. Yeah, my mic keeps dropping out. Apologies. Yeah, so it's a programme for government commitment for all 4 nations, so England, Wales, Scotland and Ireland. And it means that all the businesses that supply and put packaging on the UK market are going to be responsible for the costs of producing it and also for the costs of disposing of that waste and managing that waste once it's thrown away by residents. So that includes the collection right through to disposal. So in terms of the packaging side of things, the aim is that those producers of the packaging will become more sustainable over time. I'll come into more detail now. So bear with me a second while I go through the report. So in terms of the DRS, which is Deposit Return Scheme, geez, my screen is jumping around. The aim is that it encourages people to recycle. So what they'll do is they'll take their drinks container to a point of purchase and they'll be given a monetary deposit back. So it's a bit like we used to do, back in the 70s and 80s. You'd buy your bottle of or your can and you take it back to the shop and you'd get your 20p back. So it's exactly the same as we used to do years ago. The aim is that it increases the recycling rates of those drinks containers, and the aim is that it reduces litter as well. So that's what the purpose behind the scheme is. We obviously brought the report back in June 2022, which I've included in Appendix 1. So we've got more details around that within that report. Then we've got the EPR, which, I mean, there's not much changed in terms of the DRS other than Wales has pulled out. There was an announcement last, sorry, I'm having real IT problems this morning, so I'm having to try and go without seeing my screen, so apologies. So Wales pulled out of the UK scheme back in November last year. There was an announcement by Welsh Government to pull out because the UK government decided not to include glass in the deposit return scheme. So Wales has decided to set up its own scheme separately. So the aims of that is that we move forward over the next few years with our own scheme. Apologies, scheme. Chantal, can I just ask you to come in? I'm having real problems with my screens at the moment, jumping around.
Okay, is that working? Yeah. Okay, so to pick up from what Katie was saying in terms of the DRS, yeah, Wales has been the only nation to come out of that in terms of wanting to include glass. They're currently running and are in a consultation period for what that's going to look like and how we deliver that scheme. So that consultation period is live until October this year, where they will then kind of review that and look to provide a response for spring 2026. So there's no live date for the implementation of DRS at the minute. and they're looking at solutions for how they're going to run that. So whether it will be run simply in supermarkets in store, or whether a digital scheme can also be run as well. So they're taking that away to look at that. So Welsh Government are there. And then in terms of EPR, so all local authorities in Wales have been given indicative payments for this now. So that was based on data that was supplied to Welsh Government for 22-23. So all recycling and waste tonnage and data was supplied. They are indicative payments, so that could change. There is also, we will be monitored as well, so on the EPR. So depending on our performance, this money has been supplied by the government to help local authorities achieve those recycling targets, improve waste services, etc. So there will be close monitoring taking place as well. And Welsh Government have confirmed that payment can increase or decrease, and there could be charges put on those councils that aren't improving with that monetary support as well. So again, they're looking at how this is going to run. So the first payments won't come through until October this year, and it will be continuously monitored. But EPR is to put the process back onto the supplier. So, and it's also there to improve the likes of littering waste as well. So to put the onus on to individuals to take it back, to get that deposit, whether that's curbside or in stores. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, open the floor to any questions. Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the reports. I've got some questions on this. We're all keen to see increase in recycling, that goes without saying, and particularly not leaving litter on the road. That is a particular concern. But I've got some questions. The first is on page 90. It refers to the scheme administrator having the option to issue penalties for non-compliance. So who is, as I missed it, but who is the scheme administrator and what are the sums involved? It sounds like an unelected quango finding a democratically elected local authority, and I don't know how that sits with us. How would it affect our own recycling targets? Because if this system goes ahead, then presumably there'll be less curbside recycling, which would then mean that we would be more at risk of an infraction fine, or perhaps that's covered in the form, and I'm sure Katie's going to come in a minute and answer that one. You mentioned, or someone mentioned about Wales being the only local authority to want to include glass. Is that correct? I thought Scotland also wished to include glass, and that there were concerns that this would create an unlawful trade barrier and wouldn't actually be deliverable. And also that far from increasing recycling of glass, it would actually reduce recycling, because rather than the glass ending up in more glass bottles, which I guess is what happens with our own recycling process, there's a danger that this would all end up as crushed aggregate in road building. So it might be counterproductive, and I'll be interested to hear Chief Officer's views on whether that's a sort of reasonable fear or not. It does seem that this is an extra cost for businesses, an extra cost for consumers, and I'm not totally sure at this moment that whether the increase in recycling will actually be achieved and will therefore justify that. So I would appreciate further comments. Thank you.
Okay, if you just keep a note of those for a moment, and I'll just bring Councillor Peers in.
All right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Katie says, paying a small deposit on a drinks bottle isn't new. I remember in the 60s when we were kids, proliferation of house building around Buckley, a lot of discarded glass Corona bottles, very valuable, 3 pence in the old money, which equates to 4 bottles for 5p these days. But yeah, that's what we did as kids. But the practicality of this, so you go to somewhere like Tesco and you buy all your drinks, and in Wales you've already paid your premium because of the minimum charge per unit in Wales. So now there's another charge on top of that for the glass bottle. And when we finish with the glass bottle, I share what Councillor Parkhurst is saying. We no longer put it in the Flintshire County Council recycling, which would help with our own recycling targets, but we take it back. And where do we take it? Do we take it to customer services? Is there a special desk there where you can come along? But yeah, taking back empty bottles, we're actually doing the work of the council, surely, recycling ourselves. We've got to load the glass into the car. We've got to take it back to the store. We've got to park outside the store. We've got to carry the glass. And you know what it's like with the blue bins. When I put a blue bin out, to be efficient, it's pretty a chart would have been very useful. I'm not talking about the drinks or the cans, that's pretty straightforward. I'm talking about the full net cost of managing household packaging waste, shifting responsibility financially away from local authorities, and I think that's part of the plan. In 111, it talks about producers covering the full net cost of collecting, sorting and recycling. Now, how does this work in simple terms? The producers of a cornflakes box, for example, what is it actually? I'm pretty much lost looking at this now. Yeah, we have a cornflakes box. Now, what will happen? The fees that are imposed on packing and manufacturing companies, that will be passed on to the consumer. It always happens. It's quite worrying that costs will increase because of these schemes. And how will it work in conjunction with the council's weekly recycling connection? How do they interact, or how do they overlap? It's not clear. And again, typical Welsh government, we talk about the fines sledgehammer process which they use, the dictatorial way that they normally do things. And it's still up in the air, really, because it's not clear, having read the report, how all this fits together. The only bit that's clear is you pay a deposit on your drink in a bottle or a can and you take it back. But take it back where? Is it practical? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce. Okay, I'll bring in Chief Officer.
Yeah, I'll bring in Chantal in a minute as well. So there's quite a few questions there. The aims of these schemes are not to have an impact on what we collect at the curbside and our recycling performance. So the deposit, my understanding is that deposit return scheme would be you'd be returning your items via our own curbside collections. There are trials going on at the moment across different parts of Wales. So the couple of authorities who are trialling the scheme already to try and understand how it might work in practice. But I can appreciate the comments around the fear that costs would be passed on to consumers, and that's naturally going to be a concern by many, I should imagine. But the aim is with this scheme is that it's that polluter pays principle, that over time, I think what the governments are expecting is that those manufacturers of the packaging will find more sustainable packaging rather than it being stuff that we can't actually recycle. So that's the aim of it ultimately. At the moment, I think this year would be the highest funding we'd probably get, I should imagine, and I think naturally over time it will decrease as those producers find more sustainable ways of making it. So we'll see that the costs of collection and recycling, it would go down over time. I think that's the aim of ultimately of the whole scheme. We have raised our similar concerns to members, really, that making sure that the deposit return scheme in particular doesn't impact our recycling performance. And I think all the local authorities in Wales have said the same thing. You asked about Scotland. I am aware that Scotland pulled out of the original scheme as well because of glass being taken out by UK government. I understand they're still talking about being part of the UK scheme, but obviously Wales has decided to go its own route, is my understanding. It is a difficult one at the moment because we don't really know the impact of the full scheme until we start doing it. PAC UK are the scheme administrator. They were appointed by UK government. I'm assuming after some sort of procurement exercise, but they are the UK administrator for the EPR scheme. There are some risks for us as a local authority. Obviously, if we don't meet these thresholds and improve our performance, then you see under 1.11 under point 3 there, the scheme administrator will have the ability to actually reclaim some of the funding, which is significant. 20% of the funding altogether. So we will have to ensure that we're meeting those targets going forward. So it is an added pressure on top of the recycling performance. I don't know if Chantal wants to come in with anything.
Yeah, just to add on in regards to the scheme administrators, so they are two separate. So as Katie said, it's PAC UK for EPR, and then Welsh Government have instructed an administrator called the DMO for DRS. So that is the Deposit Management Organisation. So a newly set up scheme administrator for Wales in terms of the DRS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pearce, you want to come back? Put your microphone on.
Thank you. Chief Officer advised that the recycling would not be affected, and I took that to include the deposit paid on a drinks bottle. So if I've gone to Tesco and I've paid a deposit on my glass, but it doesn't go back to Tesco, it goes back into the Flintshire County Council recycling bin, how do I get my deposit back? Are Flintshire then going to look at what's there, and they're going to, how do you get the deposit back? And to have another quango like the Deposit Management Organisation, I think it's absolutely bizarre. Thank you, Chair.
Katie, do you want to just quickly respond to that one?
Yeah, so I mean, the detail behind the actual, the practicalities of how the scheme will work is still to be worked through, but my understanding is that it's all based on QR codes and scanning. There'll be QR codes on drinks bottles or drinks cans, and they'll be required to scan them. So we don't know yet whether our crews will have to scan them or whether the residents will have to scan them. But I mean, these are what the trials are, behind the purpose of the trials. So yeah, I mean, I can't actually advise you in practice how it's going to work, and that's why there's a couple of authorities actually involved in the trial at the moment to understand what works and what doesn't. So it's a bit too early to say at this stage.
Okay, thank you. And note just on when we come to the recommendation, we're just noting the contents of the report and the updates. We're not actually supporting it at this moment. So, Councillor Park.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for letting me come in briefly again. I just want to express alarm at the prospect of the bin collectors, checking each and every plastic and glass bottle and having to record it. I'd assume we were all going to take our, glass items back to the shop. That clearly is not the case. It just seems bizarre to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I move a second recommendation, Chair, please? That when this scheme has been fully thought out and officers know how it's going to operate, that a further report comes back to scrutiny. Thank you.
Seconded. Okay. Okay, no further speakers online. Oh, sorry.
Just a quick point. I mean, to be honest, there's at this stage there's a lot of questions that are not answered yet. But the one good thing that we see coming out of this is where it's being used in like countries like Germany. there's 90% plus of glass is going back into the system, which we're nowhere near that level at the moment. So how we get there, maybe we need a team from the Welsh Government needs to get out to Germany and do a video or something, bring it back to us to show us how they're doing it. I don't know, or they can send me and Katie if they want. For but yeah, so there is, it's working elsewhere, but we don't know exactly how yet. But thanks, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move to, oh, sorry, didn't spot your hand.
I think Councillor Banks makes one good point regarding the performance of similar deposit return schemes elsewhere in the world. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that we ought to send Welsh Government officers on a jolly, all expenses paid, but it is a good point about the performance elsewhere. It's worth noting as well that with deposit return schemes elsewhere, you get your deposit back if you return it in the approved fashion to a central hub. No other deposit return scheme in the world refunds deposits on the basis of curbside collections, and there is no workable way to do it. Everybody can see that, and I would very, very strongly suspect that when we get to the end of this process, that will not be how it operates here either, because there's no sensible way to do it. But I think Councillor Peers makes a very, very good point that you know, this is clearly going to evolve before it happens, and it's right and proper that it comes back to scrutiny.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll move to the recommendation on page 88 that we scrutiny notes the contents of the report and the update provided on the deposit return scheme and extended producer responsibility, with the addition of the recommendation that once we have further information, it comes back to scrutiny again.
Yes, once it's been fully thought through by officers and we have a presentation to tell the committee how it's going to work. Thank you.
Okay, we have a seconder for that? Seconded. Can I have a show of hands with all those in favour? Okay, that's clearly carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 7, placemaking plan for Buckley. And I'm looking to see, I think Andrew Farrow was online. Is he still with us, Andrew?
Yep.
Yes. I can't see him online.
Yes, good morning,
Okay.
members. But we've got Karen Whitney-Lang in the chamber as well. So I'm going to hand over to Karen to lead this report.
Good morning, members. This report relates to one of 7 placemaking plans in Flintshire. It is in response to Welsh Government's expectations across local authorities in Wales to develop placemaking plans for towns that they've been identified that would be seeking future regeneration investments. In this case, 7 towns were identified by Cabinet back in October 2022. Today's agenda item is specifically around Buckley and the placemaking plan for Buckley, following the completion previously of Holywell and Shotton. So it is the 3rd plan to come to this forum and hopefully to Cabinet for approval imminently. In terms of Buckley and the placemaking plan, as with the process used for the former 2 that are now completed and approved, it's been a really thorough consultation and engagement process with over 3,500 local residents participating in stage 1 and stage 2 consultation. And what effectively that means is stage 1 is identifying what the issues are amongst local residents, their needs, and then stage 2, once the plan has been developed, taking into account a range of data sets, feedback, a commercial assessment, green infrastructure assessment, a range of other documents, further consultation back in the public domain to say these are our priorities, this is what the placemaking plan for Buckley is shaping up as, and to seek feedback and support for that. And so that process has been completed for Buckley. As well as the public, we've had engagement from over 20 stakeholders through the governance arrangement for this piece of work, which is 2 groups: People's Group, which tends to be a group of internal officers, medium, sort of middle to senior management, relatively, robust group of 15 to 20 officers, and then 20 external organisations that sit on another group, the People's Group. And that is looking at people-focused services and how the plans that we're developing can take account of the needs of people and the future identified priorities. The plan for Buckley, as with those completed to date, has gone through an 8-stage process as per page 111 of the report, 111. And basically, it outlines we're now at the 8th stage of 8 in the process. In terms of some of the issues identified, just very quickly, Buckley, and the residents' responses, 64% said that they did not feel that Buckley is currently a welcoming place. 74% of respondents felt that it was not the best offer that Buckley can present for its town centre, and it was lacking. So clearly, at the the top line, some rationale for improvements in Buckley in the coming years. To be clear, the plan is a long-term vision. It's not an action plan. An action plan sits as part of the recommendations for this report. It is a visionary document in terms of the next 10 to 15 years. And it does respond to both people and place. So place being things that are physical improvements about Buckley, and people about the things that would benefit people, the residents, the businesses operating within Buckley. They're both aligned to the council plan priorities and a range of other strategies and within the main report. Both the report and the full placemaking plan included as an appendix to the report. The review of existing strategy and policies was undertaken to look at alignment and ensure that. One of the main things that has come out is very similar to the first few placemaking plans that have been completed, and that relates to looking at priorities. So what are the aims and objectives of the plan? And they're detailed within both the report and the plan itself. But in terms of what does that crunch down to in terms of priorities? So there are 9 identified priorities for Buckley, and they are contained in section 109 and then 110 within the report itself. So there are 4 place-focused priorities and 5 that focus on people, partnership working involving the local people and community. In terms of elected members' involvement, there have been 2 key meetings with Buckley Town Council and engagement with the elected members throughout the development process for the plan, and some positive consultation responses that have fed to no significant change. The plan that we have in front of us today for consideration has gone through those various consultation processes. And in terms of next steps, we have proposed that, as we have already started with Holywell and Shotton, once the plan is hopefully approved, we progress to a 1 to 2 year action plan, and that's to look at how across those priorities we respond to early actions and how they can be planned, who is going to be responsible. It's not something that is just a responsibility of the regeneration team. Whilst my team has been held account, as all local authority regeneration teams have across Wales, for bringing these plans forwards and getting their approval. It is actually cross-stakeholder, multiple stakeholder and cross-departmental work that achieves the ultimate delivery of the plans, and hence the range of stakeholders that have been involved in sort of designing and supporting the development of the plans. And that concludes where we are with Buckley placemaking plan to date. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. Councillor Mike Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As I mentioned in the report, Buckley Town Council did consider this report a few weeks ago. When we look at 102, it talks about the awarding of future transforming town place making grants would be conditional based on placemaking plans being developed and locally approved. So that seems to me a form of funding, which later on in the report, there is some doubt whether this scheme would go ahead because of the lack of funding, but I'll come on to that as I move through my comments. It talks about the issues raised under 108 brackets 4. The large vacant properties mentioned in brackets 4 are not new discoveries as part of this consultation. Flintshire County Council have known about these buildings for more than 5 years. The factory shop is a prominent eyesore, and the Old Baths is registered with Company's House as the Old Buckley Baths Community Hall Limited. Architectural appraisals and concepts have been drawn up. A working group is currently working on plans to bring the former baths back to multi-generational use for the benefit of residents. 108(7), the nighttime economy needs addressing as a priority. We did have a thriving Indian restaurant that's shut down suddenly. The Black Horse pub in the centre of town, which is featured on one of the slides as the gateway into Buckley, is closed, not to open again. And the main nighttime economy in Buckley relates really to the number of takeaways evident in the town centre. There are no restaurants in the town centre. The famous Tivoli nightclub brings in people from far and wide, but with limited offers in the town in the evening. I feel that's a lost opportunity. So I would stress that the nighttime economy does need looking at. What we do have, we have many hairdressers, Turkish barbers, charity shops, along with the takeaways. We used to have a Costa Coffee, and the mainstay of the shopping precinct in Buckley is Iceland, the excellent Bistry Farm Shop, Butchers and Delicatessens, and Mr. Bevan's DIY store. The rest are mainly charity shops. Aldi was encouraged by local councillors to come to Buckley a few years ago, and they've been here, and that's been a success. But if we look at the town centre map, it's actually not classed as being in the town centre. And the other downside to that is they had to demolish the Potter's Wheel pub so that they could have the land to build Aldi's. So on page 186, slide 68, as I mentioned, it shows the now closed Black Horse Public House and the gable end eyesore on the Quick Save, and then the factory shop building. We did have a couple of visits there with officers from the county council looking at the factory shop, but that appears to have disappeared into the long grass. We've not had any further updates on that. The area of land by the old factory shop and what we know as the Millennium Square, we want to strengthen the ties with the famous Tivoli and Buckley as suggested in the report, and it has been mentioned that that area should be renamed as Tivoli Gardens. That will secure the link from the Tivoli to that area. Section 202, this is what I want to really look at. The resources concerns over the limited amount of resource. As I said before, in 102, it talks about the funding conditionally based on placemaking plans being developed and locally approved. So if we can get that done, developed and locally approved, there may be a source of funding there. Under section 301, the statement is noted about the resources, but as we've mentioned, there are issues, there are concerns, they do need sorting out. And Buckley deserves its makeover, and the grants outlined in section 102 need to be followed up. Funding for ongoing placemaking development work post the Buckley plan is all well and good, but pointless unless the funding is available to implement. You'll be aware, Chair, that in 2001 we had the Shotton plan. Again, a nice plan, aspirational, same as Buckley, dependent on funding. How's that going? I don't know. Has the funding arrived? Again, we talk about a vision for Buckley. It's great. This is what we want, and we want it delivered. But we've got one sentence based on the concerns over the limited amount of resources. I've got here a copy of the Flint Strategy and Master Plan 2021, done a few years ago. And when we look at here, potential sources of funding. We've got 2 pages. We've got 2 pages for Flint, and millions of pounds were poured into those projects. And yet in Buckley, we have a one-liner concern over the funding available. There are 12 sources of potential income in the Flint plan, but Buckley doesn't seem to feature. So, in conclusion, the plan for Buckley needs funding and it needs investment. The county council is well financed by the council taxpayers in Buckley, and the council should now offer something in return and take the plans for Buckley forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. There was a lot there, so before I bring any other speakers in, I'll allow Karen to address those issues first, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so in relation to the funding and the concerns that you've raised, I think it is a realistic expectation management issue. We have 7 towns and there's limited resources, not just for Flintshire, but across North Wales. I think one thing to be really clear about is having a plan doesn't give us a budget and we've got a plan, so here is a budget to go and do the projects. The plan sets the strategic priority and then it's up to officers, other stakeholders to work up projects, put business cases forwards, and then project by project, they will be put forward to our funders for funding. So it isn't a case of we get these plans and there is a budget ready to spend. There's a further development piece of work for every project that will need to come forwards. But without the plan in itself, we won't be able to advance that. We won't be able to engage with funders, particularly Welsh Government. That, you know, they will say there isn't a recent strategic consultation. There isn't, you know, the gubbins behind the rationale for asking for that funding. So if we don't do this, then we can't get to that point. But I do take on board your comments and share that, you know, as regeneration manager, we could always do with, you know, more funding, not just for the 7 towns, but, you know, outside of that. But that's the reality of the funding we've got, particularly from Welsh Government. The report does outline as well, I know you mentioned there was one line about Welsh Government funding, Councillor Pearce, but the report does also demonstrate other funding that we've secured over the last 2 years, and we've subsequently been able to secure further funding from the Shared Prosperity Fund this year to advance, you know, some projects across the 7 towns as well. So year on year, there is always an option and hopeful opportunity. But I think in terms of the action plan delivery, that's why we're addressing a 1 to 2 year period, so we can look at initial priorities, look at initial concerns that we really are in a position to move on and get some projects under development for that. So I hope that responds to that particular point around the budget.
Councillor Riverton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me start by saying that Councillor Pearce has absolutely hit the nail on the head. I'm not going to repeat what he's said about the funding, about the historic plans for various towns in Flintshire, but it's a very, very good contribution. There is one line of Councillor Pearce's contribution which I'd like to quote directly, though, that Buckley deserves its makeover, and I could not agree more. So what have we got in front of us? Well, if I can draw members' attention, first of all, to page 115 of the bundle, and that in section 201, where it says that the funding already allocated to this process is £168,065, with another £86,084 being applied for. So let's sort of go through the plan and see what we've got for that money. On page 179 of the bundle, the header there is turning people into Buckley. On page 181, the header is unifying the Buckley character. And on 182, activating the public realm. On 186, under opportunities, are announcing and arriving at the town centre and the role of the activity generators. There's and then on 207, under the bit about central focal area, we identify total surface area of pedestrian added value 2. That is it in its entirety. Total surface area of pedestrianised added value to. Now, what any of these phrases mean is an absolute mystery to me, quite frankly. What turning people into Buckley involves, I mean, it sounds like quite a painful process, but I'm sure it means something to the well-paid consultants who wrote the plan. And so what do they recommend? And if we look at page 155 of the bundle, under the recommendations are that we broaden reasons to go to Buckley, support existing businesses and focus on increasing activity in the town centre footprint rather than expanding the footprint. Broaden reasons to go to Buckley. Well, if we hadn't spent all this money on a placemaking plan, I'm not sure that any of us would have come up with the idea that we could improve Buckley by broadening reasons to go to it or by supporting existing businesses. More than half of the actual concrete recommendations, not sort of vague platitudes, but the actual concrete recommendations within this report are to commission further reports from consultants or further strategies. Within this, and again, I'll give you the page number, it's 166 of the bundle under the summary of the Give My View part, 35% of residents think that Buckley is welcoming, 17% feel positive about the town centre offer, and 13% rate as good the connections and facilities. Buckley deserves its makeover, as Councillor P has said, but when you've got numbers that are that low, 13%, 17%, it is clear that there is a vast amount of low-hanging fruit in Buckley, and anybody walking round Buckley can see ways that it can be improved. And we're spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on talking about it, on vague platitudes like broaden reasons to go to Buckley and support existing businesses, and on nonsense like total surface area of pedestrianised added value to and turning people into Buckley. And we have no money to actually spend on, making Buckley a better, nicer place. I appreciate that this is a Welsh Government problem. The Welsh Government has not met a problem yet that it doesn't think the solution to is to spend a lot of money on getting consultants to talk about and none on actually fixing. But quite frankly, when we are applying for shared prosperity funding to do things, instead of applying for things to do more endless plans, and Councillor Pearce has waived a number of them in this meeting that have never been acted on, instead of doing more and more plans that contain buzzwords, jargon and nonsense, let's actually spend some money on dealing with the low-hanging fruit, because Buckley does deserve its makeover, and it's about time that we actually did something about it instead of producing more reports from well-paid consultants that are just jam-packed with nonsense.
Okay, thank you. Karen, do you have anything to add?
Yes, so in relation to the budget and the £186,000 that's been cited, that wasn't just to pay for the consultants. In terms of that, it's for the whole process. So that has paid for our data, our analysis, the officer time and capacity that we've secured from external funding to work on that. A lot of the other local authorities have gone straight into procuring a consultant and writing their plan, doing all of that work. We took a different approach, hopefully, reviewed a more pragmatic approach. We have done a lot of the work in the background, and just the final part in that journey is where we've brought the consultants in, and that's around 1/10 of the cost of other local authorities of doing so. The 186,000 is also for work to get ahead of the game for the other 4 plans that are yet to come. So we've done all the consultation at phase 1. We've undertaken all the green infrastructure audits. We have completed the data analysis. So the cost of consultants actually within that figure is a smaller figure. So I wanted to clarify that. And in terms of spending money to do that, unfortunately, because of the size and capacity of the team, we're a team of 6 with a massive workload. And I just referred to a previous meeting where an update was given around the workload of the team. We're not just working on placemaking plans, we're working on a range of other projects and development of projects and securing funding. And 4.7 million has been secured over the last 4 years. So, that is what we have to do alongside the placemaking plan development work. So I hope that responds to the points made.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parkers, did you have your hand up? Yeah. So, sorry, 1 second, Councillor Robertson, come back.
So the £168,065, how much of that has actually gone directly on spend in Buckley with, you know, concrete improvements there?
I haven't got the breakdown in front of me, but because that is a cost across the board, I can provide that detail outside the meeting. More than happy to do that. The consultant's cost, as I said, is a percentage of that. That's per town. We've still got costs to come for Mould and Flint in particular. So the other £40,000 that's referred to as sort is now secured. This year we've secured that already now from Welsh Government. So that is literally to commission the consultants. It works out under £20,000 for the placemaking consultant that's brought this plan together per town.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you don't have the exact figure to hand. If you are able to provide that outside the meeting, I'd be very grateful. Are you able to provide some examples of some of the concrete improvements that money's provided in Buckley now?
Yes, so in terms of physical and people focus, obviously place and people, as I referred to within the report, there's been, I think it's about 9 properties that have benefited from business improvement grants, the town centre property improvement grant, as we refer to it locally. That's up to £50,000 per property. Many have received more than that, and there's been private sector investment levered through that project. We've also operated schemes such as the Activities and Events Grant to bring more vibrancy to the town centre. Buckley benefited the most through that scheme through the SPF Town Centre Investment Programme. We've had a business support programme run by Save the High Street that we commissioned. We were the first in local authorities across Wales, and there were several businesses from Buckley that participated and benefited from that. So there are a few of the examples where we've secured previous funding. It's not just around the physical investment in the place, it's around the place as a whole, both to benefit people, as I said, and the place. And then in this year's funding allocation from Welsh Government, there is a streetscape green infrastructure scheme that we've put forward that has just received funding to move ahead for Buckley. So we'll be undertaking some consultation for that. And that's a project, as I said, for this year.
If you quickly, I've got other speakers.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for your discretion, Chair, and I appreciate that I'm pushing it slightly. So yeah, under 2.01, it says, to date, the development of the placemaking plans has been supported by £168,065 from the UK Government Shared Prosperity Fund and Welsh Government Transforming Towns programmes. So the town centre improvement grants have come out of that? No, they've not.
Apologies. That is literally for the development plan process. So that's for all towns, the 7 towns we're focusing on. As outlined within the report, there are other funds that we've secured. So the delivery on and implementation of the plans is a separate budget to that for the development of the plans. So 168 is for the development. And then the 4.7 million that I referred to earlier is for the implementation over recent years for projects in the towns.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parkhurst.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. You know, like others, I really hope that some money is forthcoming for you know, Buckley and indeed the other towns, because this is needed. But I want to just consider an angle which I don't think is reflected in this report, that the causes of the issues which this report addresses are obviously myriad, and I don't mean to simplify them in any way, but part of the reasons we are where we are is due to decisions made by this council, whether it's introduction of car park charges, which is referred to on page 154, whether it's planning decisions which affect the attractiveness of the town centre, page 155, or whether it's the highway infrastructure, which has been designed for the car and not to retain people in the town. And incidentally, the same sort of comments apply to Holywell. And what this report doesn't address is what lessons can this council learn from past decisions in order to avoid future mistakes. And I would suggest that if there is support in this room, to have an additional recommendation to review the positive and negative influences of past council decisions and consider what lessons might be learnt for the future. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Marcus. Councillor Dolphin.
Yes, thank you. This is a good news story, and I'm sat next to the regeneration manager here, who is top class, and I was getting angrier and angrier. But then actually, this is scrutiny, and it's being scrutinised. So there've been some really good questions, and they've been answered really well by the regeneration manager, who is part of a very, very small team, which is mentioned in the report. So in answer just to Councillor Parkhurst's observations, all our towns in the UK suffered probably historic, and certainly in Flintshire, I come from live in the Holywell area, certainly have historic problems with modern life. The old industries have gone, new ones have come along. New shopping centres have come along. These were central government decisions over a period of decades, and they've affected all our towns throughout Flintshire and throughout the country. Our shopping habits have changed. My shopping habits have changed. I have less cash. The banks are closing. The post offices are virtually all gone. So those queues that would be in a post office 10 years ago, 20 years ago, don't get those anymore. So those people have probably gone from the towns as well. So there's less footfall. Modern life is completely different, and our modern shopping habits are completely different to what they have been in my short lifetime, if you like. So things have changed. And I would point out 102. Welsh Government confirmed that the award of future transforming town placemaking grants would be conditional based on placemaking plans being developed and locally approved. So we have to have a plan before we can get funding. And we've had funding to get to this stage, and that will have to continue. No one is saying Flintshire is going to pay to modernise Buckley and Holywell and Queensferry and all it. That's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen anywhere else in Wales or the UK either. That is all based on grant funding, whether it be present grant funders or new ones in the future, and there will have to be new ones in the future. I think Buckley's had a bit of negative press today. I went there as a visitor a week last Saturday. Some of the people here might know that. I went with my wife as a bit of a stranger, and there is something in here about welcoming, and it sounds not ridiculous, but it sounds a bit odd, but it's about welcoming, announcing and arriving at the town centre. You think, well, crikey, come on. But actually, I sort of knew where the town centre was because I met my wife at the Tivoli a long time ago. That's my only connection to Buckley. So we went there as strangers. And I sort of knew where the town was, but I couldn't find any signs to tell me where to go and park. So I just went on memory and found plenty of parking. And we had a very pleasant Saturday afternoon in Buckley, actually. We spent some money, one of them in the charity shops in the precinct, which we found very good. There is an excellent delicatessen and butcher's there. We spent some money there as well. And I think we bought two flower pots as well from another shop. So we spent all our money in the precinct. And then we went to the high street. The old police station does let it down at one end of the street. That was the biggest problem I could see at that end that we saw. On the other end, there's a big empty unit that is another very large building that is empty, and that's a problem for the high street as well. But we found Buckley, although it was mentioned, I won't say what the figure was because it didn't sound very good. That thought it wasn't welcoming, but we found it very welcoming. And we were surprised. In fact, I was surprised. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. So there's a lot of positives to work with, to start with, I think, for the likes of Buckley. And the Buckley people can be proud of what they've got. This plan and local people and local businesses and this council will try and make not just Buckley, but all the other towns better for the residents that live locally and may wish to visit it at another time. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Dolphin. Councillor Glyn Lance.
Thank you, Chair. On the previous agenda item, I mentioned the word aspirational, and I think that aspirational can be used in this as well, because a lot of it is aspirational, but you've got to start somewhere. You've got to have positives. I mean, it's fair enough. I know, as Councillor Dolphin said, it is scrutiny committee, but you've got to be positive with these things. There's a lot of positives in this excellent report, and if you don't push the positives on it, I mean, the linking up of the TIV with the town, the history of what is a fine town, to be honest, you've got to be positive with it. I mean, if you look on page 118, I know there's, you know, at the moment we're at the stage where the Welsh Government have told the councils they've got to do these reports. So we've done them, and I believe this is a really good one. I really do. But just look at the funding streams that are available for when you shared prosperity fund. Up to now, the council's had £180,000. There's £2.6 billion available there. The shared prosperity fund transition programme, 900 million available. So there's lots of money floating about. But you have got to have positives. Yes, you've got to have good scrutiny, and you are all providing that. You always do. But yeah, it's got to be. You've got to keep things positive. Let's look on the good points. I mean, a lot of people mention the fact, and I mentioned this last week in the cabinet meeting, that Buckley sits very close to other areas which have got fine retail establishments at the moment, but you're also very close to them, so they could come to you as well as your customers go to them. So the night time, that is in the report about trying to push the night time. So hopefully somebody does push that through, and it does become vibrant in the evening. I mean, the TIV should be at the heart of that, because that is the attractant for the evening trade, definitely. But I've said enough. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parkhurst, you were mentioning an additional recommendation. I'd obviously like to hear what that recommendation is, but I'd obviously like to just bear in mind, if it is a criticism of what's gone before, bear in mind that might have not been all in our control. So that's what I took from your initial.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just concerned that we learn any lessons for the future. And my suggestion for an additional recommendation was to review the positive and negative influences of past council decisions and consider what lessons might be learnt for the future.
Second.
Councillor Jones. So I'm not going to open that up now, but you're speaking as a cabinet member, I take it. I'll hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I appreciate that, and I understand where Councillor Parkhurst is coming from, but it's not that simple. If it was, I think something would have been done. It's like all these problems: the more difficult they are, the more less they get done, isn't it? They don't get completed. Since I've been a councillor in Buckley, there's been 3 plans for Buckley. Detailed plans of what we wanted, aspirational, without any funding, but wanting local businesses, councils, Welsh Government to participate, which never happened. This plan actually is probably the best plan we've ever had, because it sets out what we want, what would be the benefit to the town, admitting initially that there is no funding for it, but project by project, through what Welsh Government is suggesting, we would be able to have a detailed action plan that we can go back to Welsh Government and say, we followed the guidelines. This is the money we require for this project. You promised that, and now we want it. And in general, we will get it. What we don't want in the future is a plan where we have this massive change within Buckley as an aspiration, but no funding, because that just leads to people who are consulted getting frustrated and confused with things that don't occur. And I think Councillor Pearce knows that we've had that in the past 2 or 3 times. We don't need that any longer. We need a plan which is sustainable, which looks towards the future, which doesn't necessarily detail the funding that goes with it, but it's a plan for the town which will benefit Buckley, benefit a town, which is actually suffering from the same things which every town suffers from. And I was just thinking about what you'd said about the highways infrastructure. There's a pedestrian area in the middle of Buckley. And probably years ago, we thought that was a great idea, but what it actually did was stop, not through any design, but it just stopped people going through the town. It has certain benefits in one direction and disbenefits in another. So I think it'd be very difficult to look back in the way that you've suggested and say, well, that would have been good now or good then, because things change over time. People's shopping habits change. Nobody could have envisaged how how the pandemic affected our towns. Amazon and other sites that you can purchase from, which don't require you to go out even now. You can purchase the next day. You can pay, purchase and receive the item within 24 hours. So the way we shop has changed so much, and every town suffers in that way. Banks have closed. And I remember having a conversation with a regional manager of the last bank in Buckley, when he told me, well, actually, you don't come within our, you're not within our target audience. And what he meant by that was that the only people that banks are interested in is young people, because they invest money in the bank. They're not interested in older people. And when he said older, he meant over 45. They weren't interested, because what they do, they put money in the bank and expect interest. That's how banks work. So we're not going to get the banks back. Amazon and others and the way we shop online has changed the way towns are run. We do sit between, as has been mentioned already, between Broughton and Moulds, two successful retail areas, and that's part of our problem. It stretches people out to those areas who would rather go where there's more offer. So the offer that's provided and the footfall are absolutely intrinsically linked, but it's how to get those first steps towards increasing footfall without having that retail offer. Or do you have retail offer and then expect the footfall to increase? Large retailers will not take a chance on footfall. So there's lots of things, lots of dynamic things in here which affect the way that towns benefit from a plan. Yes, the Doctors was moved out of Buckley. The Doctors was actually in the centre of Buckley at one point, and now it's moved on the outside, which people also thought was a disbenefit. And I totally agree. But that was something we couldn't have control of. And yet we had a building to put in that place, which was actually beneficial for the if you like, the residents of Buckley. So there's lots of, when you start to unravel what you're considering, I don't think there's any benefit in it, but I think there is benefit in having a plan for the future, which is acceptable, maybe not fully funded. We don't need to grandstand at any committee and make points where we imagine that there should be funding that goes along with this. We know what that would be, the aspiration, but that isn't the fact. We know we're short of money, but we're doing the best we can with what we got. And we're responding to what Welsh Government have promised over a period of time. So I think we need to take it in context. Thanks for letting me speak anyway. Thanks.
And because I've let you speak, I shall now let Councillor Chris Biddle speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I must say, really, in regard to the comments by Councillor Parkhurst, that hindsight is a wonderful thing. And what we need is hindsight beforehand, if that's achievable. Many of the problems that he's referred to, were decisions made in the past, but there were decisions made after considerable public consultation at that particular time. Pedestrianisation was very popular, and we saw pedestrianisation take place both in Buckley and in Holywell. And as a consequence, many people felt that had in fact affected adversely the trade within the town. Other things like highway improvements, in inverted commas, I remember saying at the time, Holywell ended up as the town with sort of 2 bypasses, and that took trade from the town centre. So I think we have to bear these things in mind. We were able to solve some of the traffic issues in Holywell as a consequence of that, but it did have an impact on trade within the town. And again, as has been mentioned, we've also seen developments such as out-of-town development, the Broughton Park development. I remember when Flintshire was created, that decision had already been made by Alan Deeside. And, many of us thought that needed to be looked at again, but we couldn't because the actual planning permission had actually gone through. So, again, there are issues that we've got no control of, really, as a council or as a subsequent council taking over control of an area. The other thing too, no one could have foreseen, as has been mentioned, shopping online. That has also had an impact on all our town centres. So, it's grand being wise after the event. And again, if we can actually come to some sort of conclusion about the impact of our actions on future trade and future patterns of trade, that would be a great thing. And I wish you well in that particular endeavour. But that's been the problems in the past, and that's resulted in where we are today. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Biffle. Okay, no further speakers on that. So first off, the addition of the recommendation, you had it seconded. Can I just have a show of hands, those in favour of that additional recommendation? Okay, that's carried. Okay, so moving to the recommendations on page 109. Recommendation 3 does say the word approve, but we don't approve in scrutiny, so we either support or note. So I suggest we support the coordination, development and implementation of the action plan for Buckley, if that's okay.
Can I move that we take the recommendations in parts?
Yep, okay. We'll move recommendation in section recommendation 1, note the progress made in developing the placemaking plans for Buckley. Can I have a show of hands of those in favour? That's clearly carried. Recommendation 2, review and approve the draft placemaking plan for Buckley. Can I have a show of hands those in favour? That's clearly carried. Number 3, support the coordination, development and implementation of action plan for Buckley. A show of hands those in favour. Okay, support. Okay, that's clearly carried. And can I be reminded of the actual words?
Yes, Chair. So to review the positive and negative influences of past council decisions and consider what lessons may be learned for the future.
Okay, can I show of hands those in favour? Okay, those against? Okay, that's carried. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll move on to agenda item 8. And it is Audit Wales Sustainable Development Plan, Sustainable Development, making best use of brownfield land and empty buildings. And who's going to present on this one? Is it Karen? Andrew, I'll bring you in first.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is one of two reports. This is one of two reports authored by Audit Wales. They've got slightly different contexts in the sense that this first report looks at all local government and Welsh government and how they can influence and use brownfield land in terms of regeneration, whereas the second report focuses purely on Flintshire. Having said that, they're both on the same path. So they're both going to Cabinet next week before they then go on to Audit Committee on the 4th of June. So coming back to this brownfield land one, you will see that Audit Wales have made 3 recommendations within the report, and we've made a response to them within Appendix 1 of the report. There are also 2 recommendations for Welsh Government as well, R4 and R5. And you will see in Appendix 1 our response to the local government ones. You've just spent probably 40 minutes talking about actually how Flintshire does tackle brownfield land and town centre regeneration. And I think that's reflected actually in the response that you see within Appendix 1, that we undertake this work. There are barriers towards it, and we've identified those barriers within Appendix 1 and what we do to address them. So we would welcome any comments that members have got on that management response, and we will feed them into Cabinet next week. That's my intro. Karen, do you want to add anything else in terms of the detail?
Thank you. Yes, just following on from that, I guess it's up to everyone to respond to this particular report that Audit Wales have provided. I was fortunate to be involved in being one of the consultees. Obviously, as regeneration manager, the report does outline that both my team and other services across the council have had a chance to feed into this. And I think overwhelmingly the concluded, collated information does show that some of the recommendations are actually, disappointing for us as a council, because a number of actions and activity that we are already doing are what the recommendations suggest we should be doing. So that there's a mismatch there between what the recommendations say versus what we're doing with limited resources, as we've just discussed in the previous report. But also Welsh Government, as Andy's just said, the responsibility for Welsh Government to pick up and respond to two of the recommendations from Audit Wales. And I think it does, at the way in which the report from Audit Wales has been written, probably does overview briefly or give oversight to rather the fact that there is a really good working relationship between the councils and Welsh Government in terms of the funding that's already there for things such as brownfield site regeneration, town centre regeneration, and that's not documented here. It almost it outlines an expectation that they need to work better together, that Welsh Government need to do their recommendations and provide, more gubbins for us as local authorities to then do better with that. So our response, and I didn't author this report, I'm standing today for Niall Waller, but Niall coordinated our response. And I think it's fair to say we are already doing a lot of what is suggested as a recommendation, and hence the organisational response in Annex 1 that Andy referred to, being that, we
No. Can't hear.
it is there for Holywell and Shotton, and undoubtedly will be there for future regeneration plans that are yet to come to this forum and cabinet as well. So it's just to add really to some of the detail that sits within the report, hence the recommendations that we're not, supportive of the recommendations for local authorities from a Flintshire County Council response for those reasons.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report reads as if it has been written with a great deal of defensiveness and irritation. And I don't think it's a good look when an organisation blithely bats away the considered recommendations of its regulator. In particular, I'm concerned about the response to recommendation 1 on page 219, which is about creating a list and then updating it, which sounds like less work than introducing each site to suitable developers. When you read the response, which says officers in a range of teams work with potential developers and investors, it sounds perhaps to an outside observer that there's a preferred list of developers which a council wants to deal with, and it doesn't want to open up a list of sites to anyone else. I don't think that's acceptable, and I think that this response should be reconsidered, that the recommendation 1 should read that members review and do not approve the proposed response, and add a recommendation that members require the council to review its response to Audit Wales, and in particular to comply fully with Audit Wales recommendation 1, and to resubmit its report to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, brownfield sites. This is well covered in the local development plan. Under strategic policies, creating sustainable places of community and the policy objectives. Objective 19, support the safeguarding and sustainable use of natural resources such as water and promote the development of brownfield land. We also have in the LDP STR 14, climate change and environmental protection. Roman numeral 2, encouraging the use and development of appropriate, suitable brownfield land. Now, you could argue that's just a statement, but I've seen this in practice. I've been part of a number of planning appeals where applications have been brought forward on land which is classed as best and most versatile, top grade land. And it's always in there in the hierarchy of land. Have you considered any local brownfield land that is available? So I think the safeguard is there. If we can report that back to the Wales audit, that those aren't just words, it's been demonstrated through appeals and accepted by the inspector. That, to me, is the proof that we are looking at brownfield land and we are safeguarding other land from building use. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, can see Andrew Farrow.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back on the 2 points raised so far. I'll start with Councillor Parkhurst. I don't see his interpretation of our response to recommendation 1 in terms of picking out preferred developers. We work with developers who come forward trying to redevelop brownfield sites. We don't have a list of preferred developers. And that then moves on to Councillor Pearce's point about a track record of delivering on brownfield land. And this is one of the indicators within our local development plan annual monitoring report. And we've done one of those last year that went to full council, and there is a provision within the local development plan to bring forward housing units on brownfield land. And we are exceeding the target within the local development plan in terms of bringing forward units on brownfield land within town centres as well. So I think we have got a track record to back up our response to recommendation 1. But the purpose of bringing it to Scrutiny Committee is to hear the views of all members in terms of when we then report this back into Cabinet and subsequently Audit Committee. So hopefully that helps, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Andrew. Councillor Parkhurst, do you want to come back at all? Or?
Well, Chair, only to say that having the list of potential sites specified in a way that any interested parties could express an interest to the council seems like an eminently sensible suggestion, and I can't see why it should be restricted in any way.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce, are you okay with what's been said so far? Okay, Councillor Bithell.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, we have both in local policy and national policy the desire to actually promote and redevelop brownfield sites rather than taking up green fields elsewhere for development, and that's been our policy for many years. You know, I can think of particular sites where planning permissions has been granted for redevelopment and nothing has taken place since then, with all due respect. You know, developers are very reluctant often to take on such sites because there are costs involved, and again the list is there in terms of, you know, the viability of certain sites, brownfield sites, some of which are contaminated, some of which are contaminated quite heavily and need a lot of money spent on them to bring them into redevelopable state. And that's a deterrent very often for developers to take them over. And of course that has a consequence on the cost of the properties that result from the development that has to be recovered by the developers. Again, in return to empty properties, it's been long our policy, for example, in the UDP and previous development plans to actually see properties which are empty in our town centres, high streets, above the shops and so on, for them to be redeveloped and reused for people who are on our housing waiting lists. And we've been a great advocate of that for many years. And we do have an empty homes officer who works very hard for us to ensure that many properties like this are brought back into usage. we could do with more help in that particular respect as a resource. We probably need another officer at least in order to do that. And again, we've taken help and advice from other bodies and other local authorities in the best ways of dealing with these issues to try to get these particular properties back on the market and serving a useful purpose in actually providing living accommodation for people. So we have done a great deal in this respect, but it costs money and it costs resources at a time, when we don't have that, with all due respect. And I think the report highlights that. But it's in no way a reflection on us that we have not pursued these policies, because we have, and we still are. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bithell. Karen, do you have anything to add?
I don't know, not really, just to concur with what Councillor Bithell said. There is a extensive programme in place of regeneration works. Regeneration, the team I manage deals with town centres. There are other teams that have contributed towards this report, and I think there's, within the pending information, the response has been based on those as well, both within planning, the empty homes, but also the barriers that are identified within the report. It's not just about officer capacity, but things like phosphates, the planning material considerations that are affecting the development of sites. So I think it has been well thought through in terms of developing the response. And as I said earlier, I was fortunate to be one of the consultees, so I know the extensiveness of the information that's been provided to reach the recommended response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to you, Councillor Parkhurst. Now, you wanted to make a recommendation to change the wording. Did you want to pursue that, or are you happy with what you've heard?
I'd like to maintain my suggested changes. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that? Seconded. Okay, do you have the wording?
I speak on the amendment, Chair.
Just confirm the correct wording, please, Councillor Lloyd.
Sorry, Councillor Parkhurst, so you said that members do not support the proposed response to Audit Wales, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks. No, just to speak on the extra recommendation there. I'm reading the officer's report back to Audit Wales. I'd just like to point out that in their comment about the teams working with the potential developers and investors, there's no favouritism given there at all. I don't think to work with developers is an advantage, and it benefits the community so as to get things right. That's the main thing. I think that's what the officers are trying to make the point in that comment, and so no favouritism at all, in my opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lloyd. Okay, so going around, recommendations are that members review and approve the proposed response to Audit Wales with the additional or the recommendation that
members do not support the proposed response to Audit Wales. It's a suggested change to number 1.
So the recommendation is that members do not support
the proposed response.
The proposed response. Okay.
Councillor Parkhurst has moved a motion that members do not support. There is not an amendment on the table because nobody has moved the original. So Councillor Parkhurst should be taken as the substantive without any votes on amendments.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much for that. So we take the recommendation that is that we do not support the proposed response to Audit Wales. Have a show of hands, those in favour? Okay, show of hands, those against? That vote has gone against. So therefore, the recommendation is that the members review and approve the proposed response to Audit Wales. Can I have a show of hands, those in favour? And can I have a show of hands, those against? Okay, that's been approved. Okay, thank you. At this point, it's 5 minutes to 12. We normally take a break at 12 o'clock, so I propose that we adjourn at the moment, and we come back at 12:05. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Environment and Economy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and we will continue with agenda item 9, Audit Wales review of planning services. And if I can hand over to Andrew Farrar.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So, as I've said, this report is going into Cabinet next week and then on to Audit Committee on the 4th of June. So we'd welcome any comments that members may have on it, especially the management response to the 3 Audit Wales recommendations that you'll find in Appendix 1. Audit Wales undertook this audit in the spring of 2024 of what they refer to in the report as planning services, but you'll see that they focus specifically on the development management service, and they only make passing reference to the other statutory functions of the planning service, like, for example, local development plan production. And whilst they looked at development management, they didn't look at any individual planning decisions. The fieldwork was made up of interviews with senior officers, cabinet member, chair and vice chair of planning committee, plus a focus group of staff from the development management team. They've got 3 recommendations there, and you'll see their report in full at Appendix 2. And the way that this process works is that we have to respond to each of those recommendations, and you see that response in Appendix 1. The first thing to say is that we accept the recommendations, and you can see our response starting on page 226 of your report pack. The 3 recommendations, I'll go through them in order. R1 focuses on what I think was the driver for Audit Wales initially starting their audit, and that was that we were temporarily unable to submit our performance data to Welsh Government from the development management side of things. I think it's really important to stress that this wasn't a choice of ours not to submit it. We couldn't submit the data because the new back office system at that time couldn't provide us with a robust, accurate data set. Now, Welsh Government were aware of that. They knew this, and they were comfortable that we needed some time to address that problem. And we've done so. And by the end of the summer of last year, we submitted all of the overdue data. So R1, going into a bit more detail, is about updating Cabinet and Planning Committee on the reporting issues and appropriately reviewing the risk register. On the latter point, the data system no longer presents a risk to either the portfolio or council. You'll see that in column 3, we've put in place a system for reporting performance to Planning Strategy Group on a quarterly basis, Planning Committee and Overview and Scrutiny Committee on an annual basis. Recommendation 2 is about policy review, and 2 in particular, planning enforcement policy and the planning code of practice. The enforcement policy was last reviewed in 2018. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a significantly old policy, but irrespective of that, it has always been our intention to review it. And there's a draft and planning enforcement policy going to Planning Strategy Group in June of this year. And after that, it will go out to consultation before it's ultimately adopted by Cabinet and Council. The Planning Code of Practice was reviewed at Planning Strategy Group in March of this year, and those proposed changes will go to the next Standards Committee available. Then R3 is about refreshing and reinforcing the responsibilities of various committees when it comes to performance. And you'll see in terms of the response where we're up to in terms of doing that. So since this report landed, we've actually reviewed the terms of reference for Planning Strategy Group twice. We did that in November 24, and we did it most recently at the March Committee of Planning Strategy Group. For Overview and Scrutiny Committee, all those members who aren't sitting on this committee will know, we do that annually. And then programme board, we reviewed that in November 24. Planning committee, we intend to review the terms of reference on the 11th of June 2025. That's post the annual general meeting of the council. So the purpose of today is to get your response, well, get your views on our management response, and then we will feed that back into the cabinet meeting next week, and then audit committee on the 4th of June, when we'll be joined by one of the senior auditors who undertook this work back in the spring of last year. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief Officer. I'd like to ask some questions of any reserve a right to come back once I've had a response, please, if that's possible. We are told that Audit Wales knew that reporting had not taken place for 2 years, but yet this scrutiny committee was not evidently told. Is that right? Who did actually know this? Did the cabinet know it? Did the planning strategy group know it? Did the programme board know it? Incidentally, what is the programme board? Members who I've spoken to don't know what it is, who is on it. We are told that members are on it, but you know, who are they? How are they elected? What is the terms of reference? On page 240, it says that Flintshire was the only Welsh planning authority not to have submitted quarterly reporting since 2022. And this committee wasn't told. I find that astounding and totally unacceptable. I'd also refer to page 243, where it says that if service is not meeting planning decision targets, applicants may be eligible for an application fee refund. So how many planning application fee refunds might be expected or possible? And is that on the risk register? I think we ought to know. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Andrew, would you like to come back?
So with respect to your initial point about Audit Wales aware of the fact that we hadn't submitted information, I don't know where they got that information from, whether they've looked at the Welsh Government website for non-submission of development management data. That could well be it. In other references there to your question, the programme board is a meeting of members and officers. They were initially set up to track the delivery of efficiencies. So they'd probably been in place for 6 or 7 years, but they've now expanded to also pick up things like the review of the risk register, the review of any performance issues, any developing policies. And it's the first opportunity that members can work with officers, well, cabinet members can work with officers to address any issues in terms of developing policies or strategies or projects before they enter into a wider public arena. In terms of planning strategy group and whether they knew about the lack of data, we hadn't brought any data forwards to planning strategy group. When we were asked for data with respect to enforcement data, we provided that data to this committee back in 2022, I think it was, or maybe slightly earlier than that as well. So that's where we are in terms of the derivation of the report and what was known at what time. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report clearly says that Welsh Government were aware of this fact, that the data hadn't been provided, but what we have not had addressed in the answer is why this scrutiny committee was not advised of that. This committee is here to scrutinise such matters, and there has been either a decision or an omission not to inform this committee, and I don't find that to be acceptable. And I would like to suggest that a in-depth review is carried out of the functions of a planning portfolio, facilitated by the WLGA, so that there's a peer review of what happens, because I just do not think it is acceptable for this committee to be kept in the dark. And I think we also need to know, because I don't hear from the answer that we know the scale of the financial risk to the council from not meeting decision targets. And I'd like to add a recommendation also, I'll confirm the wording in a minute, that we are informed of the scale of this risk. And I think we also ought to review the membership and the terms of reference of the programme board and have that submitted to this committee so that we all know what it does and who makes the decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Parker. Is there any other speakers? Councillor Ibbotson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a number of questions for the Cabinet member. First of all, has he read the report from Audit Wales? This is the Review of Planning Services, Flintshire County Council, document reference 4715A2025. Has he read it?
Councillor Bithell, you're on mute at the moment.
Yes, Chair, I've read it. Thank you.
Thank you. In which case, does he agree with me that this is damning of the management of the portfolio?
Yes, it is a very critical report, Chair, and I think we're all very well aware of that, and it's highlighted within the report. Notwithstanding that, there were issues and there were problems. In the first instance, it was the pandemic itself which threw us back, really, and not just this authority, but other authorities as well. And in addition to that, we had the complications resulting from the new back office system, the agile system, which members will recall promised a great deal, and took a long time to actually rectify issues regarding that particular system. And that was very frustrating. You know, personally, I found it very useful to have those particular details before us at this committee, and there was no problem in the past of producing those figures under the old system, and there were regular reports on performance and those performance targets as an authority. So
thank you.
Yes, that's what we always had, and that's what we were eager to get back to as soon as possible when these particular teething problems with the agile system was replaced. But at the time, we were unable to produce actual robust and data issues really on that particular performance matter, and I think members have to realise that.
Thank you.
I think members do realise that, because again, I think members had themselves problems of getting through the agile system into the matters that they wanted to look up on the site. There were problems, and we have to admit that, and it's been well recognised. Thank you.
I'm grateful to Councillor Bithell for his candour in agreeing with me that the report is damning. The next question for Councillor Bithell is what he considers his role to be in respect of the portfolio and the department. How involved does he see his duty to be? Does he take responsibility for decisions made within that portfolio? Does he see his role as to provide a degree of scrutiny of the portfolio in a degree of depth, given his role in Cabinet and the remuneration that comes with it, that perhaps members of this committee are not able to?
Yes. For example, in the last meeting of the Planning Strategy Group, we did have a report on performance targets, and we did have a report on the audit report. And again, I was very critical at that particular time. But having said that, I also acknowledged, as other members did, of the difficulties that we were facing at that particular time, and they were long in the process of actually recovering from that. And I think we have to recognise that as a fact. Thank you, Chair.
I appreciate those difficulties, Councillor Bithell. Thank you. Councillor Bithell, did you know that the data was not being reported to Welsh Government?
Yes, Chair, as the report points out, the Welsh Government have been aware that we were unable to provide this particular robust data information which they require because of the problems that we were having at the time. And again, we were assured that Welsh Government was understanding of the situation and comfortable with that particular issue.
Okay, can I just ask Councillor Ibbotson, if you can ask your questions and we get the answers. I'm a bit concerned about that. It's going backward and forward on this. So if you want to ask your questions, and then we'll get a full response.
Thank you. I have only one more question. Councillor Bithell has obviously said that he's read the report. On page 11 of the report, which is page 243 in the document pack, paragraph 30 says formal and robust scrutiny has not taken place at a corporate level to evaluate the performance of this service in meeting its statutory duties. Councillor Bithell, you've said that that you see it as your role to provide formal and robust scrutiny. You agree that the report from Audit Wales is damning. You've agreed with it. It says that formal and robust scrutiny has not taken place. You've said that that's your role. If you've failed in your role, will you resign?
No, Chair, I will not resign. The issues are highlighted in the report. That information was not available, whether I wanted it or anyone else at that particular time. They could not be actually accessed because of the problems that we were having with the system at that particular time. And neither I nor anyone else, including Councillor Ibbotson, could have accessed them because they were not there for our particular perusal.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Andrew, you want to come back?
I was conscious that I didn't pick up Councillor Parker's question about refunds, and Matthew Parry Davis is in the room and he's got some information in terms of responding to that. And then perhaps once we've heard from all members, I'll come back and sum up from the officer perspective, Chair, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. So to respond to Councillor Parker's question about risk of refunds, so the statutory provisions say that if we are unable to determine an application within the statutory 8 weeks, and we haven't secured an extension of time to that 8 weeks, then we should refund the fee in full to the applicant. I get a weekly report that shows any application that has reached 6 weeks and hasn't got an extension of time in play. And at that point, then I will speak to the team leaders and or the case officers to ensure that a extension of time is secured. If we can't get the agreement of the applicant, then we will determine that application and it will likely be refused as a result of lack of sufficient information, because that's the most common cause that an application will go over the 8 weeks. So there is a risk, but that risk is very low. We had an internal audit review in terms of that risk, and it is something that will be included on the risk register.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks. Yeah, from my point of view, being the chair of planning at the moment, just like to point out, as Andrew said, that this is focuses on the development management team, and they didn't review the individual planning decisions. But I'd like to obviously we must accept the criticism from the audit committee. But looking to the future, I feel that the officers are dealing with the recommendations, are being dealt with. What I would like to ask is when the data and the terms of reference come back to the planning committee to review, would it need to be a separate meeting? Because I can't really see how they can be discussed at a planning committee when we've got applications to deal with. Would we need a separate meeting to deal with that, Andrew or Matthew? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll take a couple more speakers for Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On page 226 under R1, it does say that the weakness that was found in the response was a result of the move to a new back office system that has been declared back to Audit Wales. It then begs the question, has that problem now been fixed? In the second paragraph, second column, it says by August 2025, which we have not yet reached, the system could produce a robust data set. Should that be August 2024, or should the word could be changed to will? It's just to ensure that we've got a robust response back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for permitting me to come back. I'd like to just make a couple of comments and then add two additional recommendations, please. But the first comment picks up on Officer Matthew Parry Davis's remarks, and thank you for the undertaking to provide the financial details. If I understand correctly, and to summarise, basically, if applicants don't agree to an extension, they get their planning application refused. That's how I've read it. I mean, I don't think that sounds a kind of customer service friendly, proposition. You do as we say, or tough. And I'm wondering if those are automatic refunds for planning applicants who don't want to be, snowballed in that way, or whether they have to apply individually, and if so, what is the mechanism, and does anyone know there is that process in place? The two recommendations I would like to add are, firstly, that the WLGA, that's the Welsh Local Government Association, is requested to facilitate a peer review of the planning service with a comprehensive report to be submitted to this scrutiny committee by the end of this year. And secondly, that members are advised of the membership of the programme board and its terms of reference, and that a further review of its terms of reference is conducted by the end of Q2 this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Andrew, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, just in response to what Councillor Parker's just said, and just to remind members that the role of this committee is to make recommendations to Cabinet. And the focus of this report is, do you agree with the responses to the three recommendations of Audit Wales with respect to the planning service? So you've got the three recommendations as I've gone through them. I'll pick up Councillor Pearce's point. He's quite correct. In R1, it should have said by August 2024, we could accurately report, and members who sit on Planning Strategy Group will know that we provided quarterly updates on performance data since we've been able to do that. So those reports have gone in, and that you'll get an annual roundup, and then that annual roundup will come to this committee and into Planning Committee, which takes me on to Councillor Richard Lloyd's point about Planning Committee. We'll pick up the terms of reference as part of the June meeting. I don't think we need a separate meeting, if I'm being honest, to pick up performance data. But, we can take a view on that close to the time part. It depends how many other items are on the agenda, but I know other authorities who bring a monthly performance data report to their planning committee. I'd say an annual report is what we're suggesting within this report as acceptable. And that's really what went through Planning Strategy Group as well. If I could just come back to Councillor Parker's point about programme boards. All portfolios have a programme board. It's not just a planning, environment and economy programme board. They are uniform across the whole council. I'm quite happy to provide, if you want it to be an action from this meeting, I'm quite happy to provide the terms of reference of the programme board that we reviewed in November of last year, and the attendees at that meeting. That's quite simple. It's quite easy. We can do that. I'll do that within a couple of weeks. So finally, just to round off, there's been reference made to this being a damning report. I'd certainly say that some of the language in the report is critical of the planning service. But what you have to focus on is the recommendations, and actually the recommendations that Audit Wales make are relatively benign. And if you look at the progress against each of those recommendations, as I outlined right at the start, we're actually on top of most of those recommendations. The enforcement policy, there's a gap there. We're bringing that to Planning Strategy Group in June, and then that will go out to consultation thereafter. And then the gaps in terms of reference, as I've described, and that's within R3, the management response. We've got Planning Committee 1 still to do. And we also need to update the Planning Code of Practice subsequent to the discussion at Planning Strategy Group in March. So there's, I'm not underestimating the criticism of that can be found in the report, but the recommendations, I would hope members would see, we've addressed the bulk of them since the report was even published in draft form. So that's my summary. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Chris Biddle.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to Councillor Parker's comments in terms of dealing with applications in a timely manner and within the sort of 8-week target period, we did discuss this at the last Planning Strategy Group, where members who are present will be able to testify to that. In the past, certainly, we have turned down applications, for example, where all the details were not available before us. There have not been the responses from the developers in relation to particular aspects of the plan. And they've been turned down, and that has meant that they've had to reapply. And that in terms of time and in terms of cost to the applicants has to be borne in mind in terms of value for money. And what we do now really is to press those particular points and those particular respondees, including the applicants, to get that information before us. But we did have a thorough discussion about this in the Planning Strategy Group last time. And, there are sound reasons, I think, which Matthew has explained, why we do it in the way that we do. And again, I think that's appreciated by applicants in that particular situation. They benefit from that insofar as they are given the time to actually respond to those particular requests and demands, and that their applications in the long term are dealt with far more rapidly via that particular process. But this was thoroughly discussed. I can assure him of that fact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Biddle. Can I just check with all your questions answered from Matthew or Andrew? Okay, if there's nothing further, can we move to the recommendations? We have the 2 recommendations that are on the document, followed by Margaret, if you.
So yes, so the third recommendation as proposed would be that the WLGA is requested to facilitate a peer review of the planning service with a report to be presented to this committee. The second suggestion by Councillor Parkhurst, I think the Chief Officer has suggested that could be resolved very quickly via the action tracking. Would that be acceptable to Councillor Parkhurst?
Yes, thank you. Yes, that second point would be acceptable. Can I just say that in regard to the first additional recommendation, I did say by the end of this year. Thank you.
Okay, do you have a seconder for those? So can we have a mover and a seconder for those recommendations? No? Second. Oh, sorry, say that again. Okay, recommendation 1, all those in favour?
Chair, can you make sure that we have the amendment to respond to change the date Shane, we have an error in the response under R1, which we're scrutinising. August 25 should be August 24. Are we taking that as well as part of the recommendation? No, there's an error in the date on this submission going back to Cabinet.
Okay, so with that, I'll speak to Margaret in a sense of clarity. So recommendation 1, can I have a move and a second there? Okay, and can I have a show of hands, all those in favour of recommendation 1? That's carried. Okay, recommendation 2, can I have a move and seconder for that? And can I have a show of hands, all those in favour of recommendation 2? That's carried. And recommendation 3, can I have a move and seconder for that? Moved and seconded. And can I have a show of hands, all those in favour of recommendation 3? Okay, can I have a show of hands against those on recommendation 3? Okay, that falls then on recommendation 3. So that concludes agenda item 9. Okay, before we move on to agenda item 10, it's need to move local government access to information to consider the exclusion of press and public for agenda item 10. Can I have a mover and seconder? Move.
Thank you, Chair. The reason given for the exemption for the exclusion of the press and public here is that the public interest in withholding the information outweighs the interest in disclosing the information until such time as the discussions with the employees have been concluded. This is from the Local Government Act 1972, and the relevant section relates to information relating to any consultations or negotiations or contemplated consultations or negotiations in connection with any labour relations matter arising between the authority or a minister of the Crown and employees of or office holders under that authority. I appreciate that, I'm not convinced that the public interest test has been met here, but I appreciate that evidencing that would require going into detail about things which up until this point have not been put in the public domain. I wonder whether it might be possible for the officers to point to page numbers within the pack of the sections that they feel trigger this exemption.
Are we getting into this discussion of the document itself now? I'm a bit worried about this. Sean?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. So in terms of the request for the Chief Officer for Governance and Legal to review whether this report should be within the public domain or not, there was consideration in terms of the potential impact of those who undertake work in this area, in terms of actually pointing out, well, the reference will be to, in terms of service review, and if members want to sort of discuss any aspect of that service review. So I think we start talking about service review in the first page of the cover report.
Okay, thank you, Sean. So can I have a mover that we move into part 2? Moved, seconded? Seconded. Can I have a show of hands, all those in favour? That's carried. Okay, thank you.